As President Marini had stated, be sharing tonight the tentative budget. And what I can tell you is that this tentative budget, in ideal circumstances, we want our tentative budget to match our final budget, that we bring it out to the community, things stay solid, and our final budget matches our tentative budget. That will not be the case this year. Our final budget will be very different than our tentative budget. What I'm asking the board to do tonight is to vote on the fact that I'm putting together numbers that have a balanced budget, but because of the news that we got recently, and many districts throughout the state, there's no way that you can come up with all of the right answers in a 2.5-week turnaround period. We need some more time. So while I present the budget tonight, I want you to be aware of that as I point some things out to you. And I'll start with what our tentative budget is going to be. I want to thank all the budget managers for helping put together as responsible of a budget as we possibly can. And as I mentioned, this is only tentative. There will be changes. And if you come to the final budget hearing, you'll hear exactly what those changes are. Nothing's being hidden. Everything is going to be transparent. So we will have the tentative budget for approval, as well as a couple of other items as we move through here. And Mr. Eckert and I are going to kind of tag team here on our budget presentation for today. Yep, budget calendar.
So just wanted to take you through our budget calendar that we follow here. The process has been ongoing for the last several months. In November, we distributed allocations to our budget managers and asked them to submit their budget requests by late December. Once all budget managers' requests were submitted, we started to review the requests and had any needed follow-up discussions with individual budget managers. In late January and early February, budgets were reviewed with the superintendent and prepared to share with the operations committee in February. Also in February, the state opened the budget software and we were able to begin entering budget information into that software. We learned our state aid allocation on February 29th, which turned out to be $2.3 million less than anticipated. The cut was actually $2.7 million, but we did anticipate a $400,000 reduction. The operations committee reviewed the budget again on March 15th, which brings us to tonight, where we asked the board to approve the tentative budget. Following tonight, the tentative budget will be sent to the county office for approval and then advertised in advance of the April 29th board meeting, where we will hold the public hearing on the 2024-25 budget. Any changes to the budget between now and the April 29th budget hearing will be detailed during the public hearing on the budget, as Mr. Volpe had stated. So the budget goals that we originally had set for the 24-25 school year were pretty simple, given an anticipated state aid cut of $400,000. All the goals were focused on maintaining and protecting the programs that are in place for the 2023-24 school year, the staffing levels for those programs, and to do the proper maintenance of our facilities. Unfortunately, when state aid information was released on February 29th, we learned that our state aid was being cut an additional $2.3 million. As a result of this unexpected cut, we will not be able to meet all of these budget goals. The cuts will need to be identified in time for the April 29th budget hearing that will still allow us to provide a thorough and efficient education as required by the state of New Jersey. For the past 6 months or so, we've had a link on the district website, as well as allowing people to come to the podium here to talk about input for the 24-25 budget. The areas that were requested were full-day kindergarten, healthy school hours, athletics, increased bus driver aid hours, ARIS and HMS extracurriculars, courtesy transportation, elementary speech therapists, full-day preschool, elective programs, HMS parking lot, instructional supplies and subscriptions, and student athlete option 2. So at this point, we'll start to get into a little bit of the budget overview. So a quick overview of the proposed tentative 24-25 budget. Our general fund is increasing by just over $2.9 million, despite our state aid reductions of $2.7 million. The reason for this is our 2% tax levy increase, plus we are taking a health benefit waiver in the amount of $777,000. And the last piece that really makes this really increase is that we are taking a $3.25 million withdrawal from our capital reserve account, which will be used on one-time projects. The grants and entitlements portions of the budget is comprised of federal, state, and local grant and donations. As the state recommends, we budget 85% of the current year actual awards, since we do not learn our federal grant allocations until May or June. The final portion of our budget is our debt service, which is the principal and interest and payments for the bonds that were issued for the 2019 referendum. Also on this slide at the bottom, we show what our state aid cuts have been for each of the past 2 years and our cumulative cuts since the onset of S2. The reduction for the current 2023-24 budget was $913,000. And for the projected 24-25 budget, our cut is an additional $2.7 million, which brings our cumulative state aid cuts to just over $7 million since the onset of S2. So here's a few of the budget highlights on the revenue side. Our revenue for the 24-25 budget increases by $2.8 million, despite the state aid reduction of $2.7 million. The original projections from S2 for this year were the state aid would be cut approximately $243,000. So just to be safe, we initially built the budget around a cut of $400,000. Unfortunately, it went far deeper than our projections. We are increasing the general fund tax levy by the maximum allowable of 2%. And in addition, as I said earlier, we are increasing the tax levy this year by an additional $777,000 for a health benefit waiver, which is due to increases above 2%. The renewal for health insurance for 24-25 budget is at 8%. The other significant increase is due to a one-time capital reserve withdrawal of $3.25 million, which is $2.25 million greater than the withdrawal used in the 23-24 budget. Other revenue highlights include continuing our annual $500,000 withdrawal from our maintenance reserve account to fund required maintenance expenditures. And then the last significant piece of our revenue to highlight is a projected increase of interest of about $244,000, thanks to the increase in our interest rates from 2.15% in February of 23 to 3.14% in January of 24. And in addition to the district taking advantage, the district is taking advantage of investment in CDs with a current rate of 5.1%. And at this point, I'd like to turn back to Mr. Volpe.
Thank you, Mr. Eckert. And thank you for all your hard work. You and Ms. Lefevre have done a tremendous job. But for those of you who don't know, I'm not an easy guy to work for. I think I'm a fair guy to work for, but I have high expectations and I move pretty quickly. And Mr. Eckert and Ms. Lefevre, in a very short period of time, have really done a lot of high quality work. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank several people, the board, for your support in the committee meetings, realizing what we're doing with the budget. I want to thank the mayor and members of the township committee who have asked if there's anything we could do. Our state legislators have been very responsive to me. I see Assemblyman Fryman here in the audience, and I'm talking with him on an almost every other day basis. And I appreciate your support for Hillsborough too. If you look behind me, it stands out. It was stated that this was the single largest investment in public education in state history. And numbers wise, that may be true. There's more money flowing into public education in New Jersey than there ever has been. But are we feeling it here in Hillsborough? If you look at the county numbers behind me, it's obvious we're not. This year, there's another school district in the county that's taking a little bit of a hit. Franklin is going down a little bit, but every other single school district in the county is gaining money from this investment, and we are losing $2.7 million. A net of $21 million is flowing into Somerset County. And yes, Franklin's taking a $386,000 hit, which we could have done in our budget. We are taking a $2.7 million hit. And I would just say that that's not fair for Hillsborough. And that's why I'm appreciative of the support that we're getting. We have about 3 weeks in order to try to get some things done legislatively to make this happen. And that's why I've been speaking to our state legislators. That's why I've been down in Trenton multiple times. I said I do have a favorite parking spot down there right now on first floor, 1E. It's number, I think, 214. And I'm willing to speak to any state legislator about any issue that involves us here. Because I think it gets a little bit more dramatic when, since the onset of S2, when you look at these numbers. Since S2 has started, there has been an additional net of $106 million flowing into Somerset County. And now you can look up and down that list. And there has only been one school district that's in the negative. That's us. We're down $7 million. I'm not going to read off what every other school district gets, but there's millions and millions and millions of dollars. And one thing that I would really like the state to consider in one way, shape, or form, and I have some ideas about how this can be done, is to approach school funding with a first do no harm message. Whereas we could be at zero. Heck, I'm not even asking for an extra dollar. I would just like to have zero. And if we could shave that number down to an extra $99 million for Somerset County and distribute it proportionally, heck, I'd be okay. We would be thrilled with that if we took zero. Obviously, I'd like to get more money, but I think I'm really asking our state legislator to approach this from a first do no harm. Let's keep all school districts whole. Yes, there are other school districts out there that are needier than Hillsborough. I acknowledge that, but our kids have needs too. Our kids deserve a thorough and efficient education, and our kids deserve every single advantage that they can have. I'm sorry that 15 years ago, under another formula, or 20 years ago, that a school district may have been identified as overfunded. You know what? Those kids are adults now. They're out of school. You can't rewind time and reallocate these resources accordingly. We have kids here right now who deserve the same education that other people have gotten in Hillsborough. As Mr. Eckert said, I kind of wanted to point this out because I do think, fiscally, if you ask any of my budget managers, I tend to be a little on the conservative side. I'm not a willy-nilly spender. And what I want to make sure of is that I have predictable and rational ways of thinking when it comes to budgeting, because we do have limited resources and everybody understands that. So if you look at the history of S2 in that column on the right-hand side, there were projections as to how much we would lose, and then the actual numbers as to how much we would lose. In the first year, it was off by 24% in our favor. In the next year, it was off by 30% in our favor, then 47% in our favor. Then it was a little bit higher than we expected. It was 12% off. Then it was 18% off. So you know what I said this year? I said, I'm going to be off by like 65%, actually 64.1%. And I jacked up the amount we were supposed to be cut by 65%, bringing it to $400,000. And I looked at the history of the data and said, well, I'm going way higher than any discrepancy in the past. And when the state formula comes out, and part of the problem is there's no review, nobody's looking at these numbers, they're just pushed out to the district, and boom, it came out, and it was a 1,019% discrepancy. Nobody can prepare for that. I don't care how good of a budget manager I am. Nobody can prepare that the cut is going to be 1,000% higher than you had thought. So that's where we are. But I want to at least give the people of Hillsborough the confidence that my business office and I, we are looking to be conservative fiscally when it comes to these types of things, because we know we want to budget to a place where all students can get everything that they need. So we look for $400,000 worth of cuts. And it was hard for Ms. Lefevre and hard for Mr. Eckert to find those, but we found them. We found them, cutting it to the bone. When you cut it to the bone and there's another 2.3 million to go, Ms. Lefevre, I actually thought you were joking with me when you came and told me that. And then when I saw the look on your face, I knew it was serious. But we take our budgeting seriously. So we have to come up with what, next steps might be. And part of the reason why it's difficult for next steps when it comes to school budgeting, I want to point out a couple things to you. I've heard from several people in the community, well, your budget can go up 2% every year. That's not actually true. Our budget cannot go up 2% every year by law. The amount we raise in the tax levy, which is 85% of our budget, close to 85%, that can go up 2% every year. So if you picture, if 100% can go up 2%, that's a lot more than 85% going up 2%. So we've already got those shackles on us. I have some numbers behind me right here too. So 85% of our budget can go up 2%. Let's look at recent inflation numbers. 2021, 7%, 22, 6.5%, 23, 3.4%. And this year's not over. It's approximate. It's going to be about 2.8%. So it's good that it's coming down, but I would submit to you that all of those numbers are above 2%, every inflation number. When we look at our consumer price index numbers, when we first came out of COVID, it was about 1.91%, which is right around 2. So a lot of school districts made up some money coming out of COVID because there were less expenses. This past year, it was at 5.86%. Next year, it's projected to be 5.81%. Those are both numbers above 2%. And the consumer price index is where we connect the costs for a lot of our goods and services, most particularly transportation. So think about that. A major part of our budget going up 5.81% when we can raise 2% on 85%. Additionally, if you look at the last column, I think our employees here deserve a raise of 3% or more. I think to go to 2% would be kind of tough in a lot of ways. Our healthcare costs go anywhere between 7 to 15% increase. So every single factor is working against us. Inflation is working against us. The consumer price index is working against us. The contractual obligations in healthcare financially are working against us. So you got all that. Then on top of that, you lose the state aid, and we lost 13% of our state aid. Something's got to give. This is not sustainable and not something that can be done over time. So we can sustained over time. So we have these shackles on us. As President Marini had said, it was a little bit of an insult to injury. Now, I don't think there was some conspiracy out there to undermine our successful referendum, but it just looks bad that I asked the people of Hillsborough to give me $2.8 million for staffing, for security staffing and certificated staff. And you said yes, in a significant number. It was more than 50%. It was a nice number. And then 4 months later, 2.7 million out the door. So if you're thinking about this in the numbers of how many staff members can be affected like this, we know because we just had a referendum for that. We are looking at every option that we have. When I've been talking to members of the community about this, a lot of people have asked about the state formula and about the variables. Well, what are they? I want to assure you there's no online calculator where you can go in and figure your information out from year to year. I also am not sure, I'm pretty sure it's not constitutional for the state to say, hey, here's your cut this year, and then the following year, and the following year, they have an annual budget that they have to do. There are some things I think they can do to control that, which a lot of superintendents are advocating for right now. But in the end, it comes down to the variables. I mean, the three major variables, without giving you, boring you, putting you to sleep, are enrollment and demographics. If you look to the right of that, you can see what our current enrollment is. And yes, since 2018, we're down, around 200 kids, a little less than 200 kids. But there are years we've gone up a little bit. There are years we've gone down. And our state aid has always been cut. It has always gone down. And this past year, too, and I am speaking with Assemblyman Fryman, and I were actually talking about this earlier today, and I appreciated that. He was wondering what my enrollment went down from year to year. I have to double check this because my numbers might be off a little bit. We'll be checking with this Mr. Ecker tomorrow. What I have right here is 17 kids. 17 kids in my mind doesn't equate to $2.7 million. If it does, I want to be going to that school district. That's one variable. Another variable is the values of the property in our town, what's called the ratables. Our township committee has tried to do a good job of bringing more ratables in because traditionally in the past, before the 2% cap, more ratables meant that more money could be flowing into our school district. With the 2% cap, what it does is it more equally disperses the tax burden among more taxpayers, but the school district doesn't end up getting any more money. So it kind of puts us head to head in a way with the township, which it shouldn't be that way either. They want to bring more ratables in, which sometimes leads to more kids. And we want to make sure we're able to educate those kids, but we'd also like some of the money that we can have along with that. But we also don't have readily accessible information or that data in hand. We don't have that data that goes to the county tax assessor's office. It's not something that we have that we can plug into a formula and figure out. It's always this retroactive game of what's our state aid and then what was the problems. And the last major factor has to do with the wealth in our town, which that's held by the New Jersey Department of the Treasury. It's a variable that gets plugged into the formula and is then spit out. And I believe that I want to make sure this is correct, the current data is from 2021. So we're always being a little bit behind. And there are some pieces of legislation that have been sponsored out there that can help slow these major variables from switching as much as they do to help. But this is what's involved in the state formula. And a lot of it's not within our control, and a lot of it's not even there for us to verify. So I've been getting a lot of questions about that. So I at least wanted to get that out there to the community. Gosh, Mr. Ecker, I think I'm really going to be boring people with some of this information, but I have to let you know too that it's been said that there's fully funding for schools, and I'm going to say that no, that is not correct. Now, here's where I bore you. There's different kinds of aid that go to schools. I'm going to just ask you to trust me on this. There's equalization aid, which is the school funding formula that everybody's been talking about, and there's also something called categorical aid. Two different buckets. So when you've heard that the schools are being fully funded, the equalization aid formula is. The categorical aid bucket is not. I want to make it very clear. I have this on the screen behind me. This is not specific to Hillsborough, but it would still help. Example, there is a type of aid in categorical aid that's called extraordinary aid. There have been promises over many years from many governors over time to we're going to fund this to 100%. And I think at one point it did get up to about 90%, and then it dipped back down to 71%. So if you want to really, really say that we're funding schools completely, then this aid has to be funded as well. Again, not specific to Hillsborough, throughout the whole state. If this was funded to 100%, we would be getting another $437,000 back that we can use. So I just want to make that clear to the people of Hillsborough, because sometimes the people in education, that's not even clear, that there's these multiple buckets of aid. Yes, one is being fully funded, it's the formula, and one is not. There's all different kinds of categorical aid in there too, but I just wanted to pull out the biggest number there so that you could see. Mr. Eckert, I'll let you go back for a moment or two to talk about the main budget drivers.
Thank you, Mr. Volpe. So here we just wanted to highlight the main areas of the budget for 2024-25. 80% of this budget is allocated to our employees in the form of salaries and benefits. Transportation is the next largest expenditure category and makes up about 7% of the general fund budget. This is for things such as contracted routes, fuel, and bus maintenance. Again, the salaries and benefits are not part of what we're calling the transportation bucket. That's in the first bucket that I talked about. Facilities is the third largest component of our general fund budget at 6% this year. It's higher than it has been in recent years because we've allocated $3.25 million for capital from our capital reserve account. Special education is one of the other large areas of the budget, approximately 3%, and includes out-of-district tuition, contracted services, and supplies, but does not include salaries. And this only leaves about 4% of the budget for everything else, including the allocations for the schools and for curriculum. So here are some of the highlights within the budget appropriations for the 2024-25 budget. As stated earlier, the health benefit renewal is at an 8% increase, which is approximately $1.2 million higher than the 2023-24 rates. Our broker has worked hard to reduce the original quote from Horizon, which started at 15%. As a result of the state aid cuts, this budget includes reductions to salary lines, building and curriculum allocations just to balance the budget. The exact positions that are reduced will be identified over the next few weeks and reported out as a part of our public hearing on the budget on April 29th. The only additions to staffing are projected to be for an autism class or a teacher, and a 0.5 instructional assistant will be added. And there will also be technology and security upgrades within this budget.
And Mr. Ecker, can I just stop you there for a second? Because I know you gave credit to our broker, but I wanted to give credit to you and Ms. Lefevre too. I want to make sure people understand how significant this is. Our healthcare costs came back, and we're told they're going 15% higher. And we kind of knew that coming into this year, but we were hoping for something lower. But when they came in and told me that, I was like, no, they can't be 15% higher. And Ms. Lefevre and Mr. Eckert said, we're going to work on some things. We're going to try and get that down. The fact that they got that percentage down from 15% to 8%, and our employees are going to get to keep their same exact health insurance that they had this year without, we don't have to switch. That's a tremendous amount of work. About $1.2 million right there. And I don't want that to just be a little highlight on the slide, because that's significant. Imagine if, in addition to that state aid cut, I was saying we had to cut another $1.2 million just because of our healthcare costs. So kudos to you, and our employees deserve some consistency when it comes to their healthcare costs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Volpe. On to our next slide, which is we're going to get into a little bit of the capital projects that will be done in this budget. There will be several capital improvements included in the budget. It is important to note that these will all be funded by the capital reserve withdrawal of $3.25 million. These capital reserve funds can only be used on capital projects and cannot be used to help offset the state aid reduction. The projects in this budget are replacing the fire shutter door at the high school commons, HVAC repairs and upgrades to multiple buildings, field lighting at the high school stadium, tennis court repaving at Amsterdam Elementary School, and facade replacement at Woodford Elementary School. And I just want to add on the tennis courts at repaving at Amsterdam, that's actually going to be a joint project between the district and the township.
Yeah, and I just want to point out there again, Mr. Eck, I'm sorry, but if some people look at these numbers, and just make sure you look at the part in the yellow, because there are numbers there. We can't just take money from here and plug the budget hole. We have to use this in accordance with our long-range facility plan. And I also do want to thank the township for being willing to partner with us on Amsterdam Elementary School to refinish those tennis courts. They have been dangerous for a long period of time, and we're finally getting those fixed.
So now we'll get into the tax impact of this budget on both Hillsborough and Millstone. As a result of this budget, which includes, again, a 2% increase to our general fund tax levy in addition to the health benefit waiver, you can see here, even though we are increasing the tax levy by the maximum allowable, the school tax rate for residents of both towns is actually decreasing. The decrease is a result of an increase in ratables for Hillsborough of $746 million and of $3.75 million for Millstone. For Hillsborough, the 2024 school tax rate will be 1.3492, which is a decrease of 0.0415 when compared to the 2023 school tax rate. For this year, the assessment for the average home in Hillsborough is $547,355. And a house assessed at this value will pay $7,385 in school taxes for 2024. This will be the sixth consecutive year where the school tax rate for Hillsborough has decreased. In Millstone, the 2024 tax rate will be 0.8608, which is a decrease of 0.0434 when compared to the 23 school tax rate. For this year, the assessment for the average Millstone home is $396,255. And that house will pay $3,411 in 2024 school taxes. This is the fifth consecutive year where the school tax rate for Millstone has decreased. Again, even though we are increasing the total dollar amount for the school tax levy, the actual school tax rate is decreasing. To determine the impact on your school taxes for 2024, you would need to multiply your recently received 2024 assessment by the appropriate tax rate for either Hillsborough or Millstone. So the next steps for this budget is for the board to approve a tentative budget during tonight's action agenda and for us to submit that budget to the executive county superintendent for review and approval. Once approved by the executive county superintendent, the budget will be advertised in the Courier News and the Beacon in advance of the April 29th public hearing on the budget. Once the board approves a final budget on April 29th, we will post our user-friendly budget on the district website. And in conclusion, we are being forced to make difficult decisions to build as responsible a budget as possible due to the drastic state aid cuts and the increases in healthcare costs. The 2025-26 budget that we will be discussing this time next year will be the first post-S2 budget, and we have not been given any guidance as to what to expect from state aid. So just to recap, our state aid for 2024-25 is $7 million less than it was in 2018-19. We will continue to work with our legislators to advocate for additional state aid for the district. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back to Mr. Volpe to provide his final takeaways on the proposed tentative budget.
Thank you. My takeaway, normally I have a whole list of things, but I just have a quote behind me. And I want to read what the governor said. And I'm hopeful that the governor, the legislature, and everybody can come through to fulfill this exact quote. At his budget address this year, he said, "We need to cultivate the potential of every student," that includes Hillsborough, "in any way we can." That means we can change legislation in order to do it. And whether they live in Cranberry or Camden, that also means equipping our state's educators with every tool they need to help our children learn and grow. I think everybody agrees with this, but that should absolutely apply to Hillsborough as well. I want to make sure we have funding for every kid. I want to make sure we're doing that in every way that we possibly can. And I want to make sure that our educators have every tool that they absolutely need. Sometimes does come down to money. And we need that in order to get these things done. If you are concerned and you want to contact our legislators, I want to thank Assemblyman Fryman for he's right here, and I'm sure he's willing to listen to people. I also do want to say I've heard regularly from Senators Wicker, but everybody else on here also needs to be working for a lot of the schools in the district. The governor will have to make decisions. The Senate president and Assembly Speaker may have to call extra meetings in order to get things done, and I think some of those things are being discussed. So you, as the residents of Hillsborough, have the opportunity to reach out and say, hey, you got to get things done in 3 weeks. And I feel that we can. I feel a sense of hope and optimism. I feel in my regular conversations, particularly, I'm sorry, Roy, but you're just sitting right here with Assemblyman Fryman, that we are going to be able to get some things done. But we have a short period of time in which to do this. And I'll be sharing this slideshow with all the numbers and everything for people. It'll probably be on the website tomorrow and out in Hillsborough happenings. But time is of the essence. I don't want to come to you on April 29th, yeah, and say, you know what, our legislators didn't get things done in time, and here's the list of cuts. It's not in good shape in Hillsborough, but other school districts are hurting too. And it's not just the S2 districts anymore. So that's why I have some hope that people are taking this in a very serious manner. And one thing that I want to let you know too is I was able to testify to the Assembly, was also able to give written testimony to the Senate, and who knows, I might be back in Trenton before this is all said and done. For those of you who haven't had a chance to hear it, I just wanted to go over briefly what some of my testimony was. For those of you who have listened before or who know me, I don't just come here for my job. I live here. I'm a Hillsborough resident and have been since 1999. I have 4 kids I do have 4 kids. But I have 3 kids who graduated from Hillsborough, and I have 1 who's a senior right now. I'm going to be living here for a long period of time. So even if I'm not a superintendent for X amount of years, I'm still going to be living in Hillsborough. So I want it to be a good community. I want my property values to be high. I want it to be the place that we all know. So I provided some testimony from a context from a parent, even though I'm the proud superintendent in Hillsborough, and I'd like to share that with you for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it or hear it. 3 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I visited the Russell Senate building. As I walked by Senator Coon's office and then Senator Graham's office, the next office was actually my destination. It was the office for the Senate Armed Services Committee. When I got into the office, I was proud to find my 23-year-old son there who serves his country as he works with the staff of this committee and U.S. senators on significantly important items that affect you and I in everyday life: nuclear strategy, missile defense, space strategy. I am really proud of my son and his work at such a young age. And while many people often say, it's good parenting you're doing, I counter with the fact that he's a product of good schooling in the Hillsborough Township Public Schools. Let me briefly tell you his story. I'm going to get emotional now. In kindergarten, he was identified as a struggling reader. However, through work with an interventionist, it turned out he was actually gifted and not behind in reading. Soon thereafter, he received gifted and talented services and started to blossom. Additionally, due to low class sizes, he was able to develop relationships with his teachers, not just simply learn academic content from them. They were invested in him as a person. That's why in 4th grade, when his mom and I got divorced, and he took it hard, our first call wasn't to a therapist, but to his 3rd grade teacher. Thank you, Renee Myers. She came to my house and played pool with my son and assured him that everything was going to be all right. He soon realized that the world was not going to end. While he continued to excel in academics, my son also had some confidence problems in middle school, but they started to grow as he excelled in cross country and wrestling, where he won multiple awards. Upon entering high school, he was exposed to an incredible array of academic offerings, including a slew of AP courses where he again excelled. As he put pressure on himself, he needed the support of mental health professionals in the schools to make himself realize that he didn't have to be perfect, and who he was enough. In 2019, I'm proud to say he graduated fourth in his class of almost 600 and went on to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, where at the end of his freshman year, he told me that Hillsborough High School was more challenging and rigorous than Georgetown. And that made me proud and scared in some ways. But he then completed his undergraduate degree from Georgetown in 3 years due to the tremendous amount of AP credits he earned while he was in our high school. Next year, he completed his master's degree in security studies and was soon then hired by the Senate Armed Services Committee, where he serves all of us. Just recently, he was named a presidential fellow, and the next step in his career will find him somewhere in the executive branch of our federal government, again, serving his country. I'm proud of my son, both as a father and as an American. My son is able to serve his country today at a high level, in large part due to the excellent education he received in Hillsborough. But I need to let you know that due to these state funding cuts, every service and resource that I mentioned, my son was privileged as a student to receive in this testimony: intervention services, gifted and talented services, small class sizes, middle school sports, mental health supports, advanced placement course offerings, and anything else you can think of. It's all now on the chopping block and may no longer be there for the students of Hillsborough. And I want to produce more students with the profile of my son and have students excel to whatever potentiality that they have. And I need resources to do it. And a lot of that is going to depend on the actions that this legislative body takes. I'm not boring you with some other things to go over in that. I know my son, I believe he's exceptional, but I want to make sure that every child, I'm able to cultivate the full potential of them, because every child can be exceptional in their own way. We need the financial support and resources to do so. Hillsborough, you have a chance in the next few weeks to reach out to our legislators to let them know that we need to keep Hillsborough, that we can keep doing tremendous things for our students, that we can give our teachers the resources that we need, and that we can set us up for quality economic stability in the future. If we do that, we can produce many more students who can do more wonderful things than my son, and even things that we think might be on a day-to-day basis are wonderful in different ways. We can create more teachers. We can create more electricians. We can create more of any kind of student that you could possibly think of. We just simply need the resources to do it. And I'm sorry to get a little sniffy, but this is very personal to me. This is personal to me because I've lived it, and I've seen what Hillsborough can be. And we're at a tipping point. If I have to come back to you on April 29th without some kind of legislative action, I'm going to tell everybody here news that they don't want to hear. And I don't want to be able to do that. So I want to thank you for your time. And there's a couple other people that I want to thank as well, though I thank several people. Mr. Goodhue, president of the HEA, and I, as far as I know, you don't know what I'm going to say about him yet, so I don't know why you're clapping. I believe we were the only union president and superintendent at the assembly when we went to testify. We were the only combo there. I believe when we showed up at the Senate Education Committee, I know you testified directly, but again, I think we're the only superintendent union leadership combo there, and we are working very hard on this. I know Mr. Goodhue has started a letter campaign that I think is about 1,600 letters right now, maybe a little. Okay, closer to 1,900 letters to our state legislators. So anything that we can do will certainly make a difference. I want to be able to come back to you on April 29th and say, hooray, there was a solution. Short-term, long-term, we're moving in the right direction. And I need just everybody to continue to support the schools, to reach out to your legislators. I know this is a longer budget presentation than normal, but this is unusual time, and we need to come together as Hillsborough in order to make this work for everyone. And again, Assemblyman Fryman, I do want to thank, it's not easy to sit here to see all of this, but I know you've been working very diligent with me to try to get these things done. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, we're going to get it done, and I'll leave it at that. That's my budget presentation. That was too long, I know.